Hello, welcome to the A Book a Day channel. Today, I will interpret for you a book called The Power of Language: How the Codes We Use to Think, Speak, and Live Transform Our Minds. This book answers the question, how does the language we use shape our thinking? More precisely, this book actually discusses the impact of learning multiple languages on human thought. Most people in the world speak two or more languages. So, what kind of impact does multilingualism have on our thinking and cognition? Before we get into the main topic, don't forget to subscribe. Laboratories around the world have conducted studies on bilingual learning. Research has found that for the elderly, using multiple languages can increase cognitive reserve and delay the onset of Alzheimer's disease by 4 to 6 years. Children with bilingual experience can understand earlier that objects and their names are not one-to-one correspondences. That is, they understand there exists a symbolic system that represents reality. For example, the gender in language subtly influences our perception of things. In some languages, nouns do not have gender, but in languages like Russian, French, or German, nouns have grammatical gender. If you've learned these languages, you've probably been puzzled by this. Why do Russians think of bridges as masculine? Germans refer to bridges as feminine she, considering them feminine. Romanian is even more unique. If there's only one bridge, then the bridge is masculine, but if you are referring to two or more bridges, then they are feminine. How exactly do these grammatical genders in language affect people's cognition of the world? Today, through this book, let's talk about how language shapes our thinking. First, let's discuss the impact of language on individuals to see how it influences our thinking, creativity, cognition, memory, and emotions. A heads up, after this part, you might really want to start learning a new language right away. Then we'll talk about the impact of language at the societal level, how it affects people's identity, and the biases and discrimination it causes. Alright, let's now delve into this book. Let's start from a physiological perspective to discuss the benefits of mastering multiple languages for our brain. Firstly, mastering multiple languages can enhance the brain's executive functions. Executive functions refer to a series of cognitive processes, including attention, inhibition, working memory, and cognitive flexibility, among others. A classic experiment called the Stroop task illustrates this. In this task, participants see words denoting colors printed in colored inks, such as the word green printed in black ink, or black printed in green ink. Participants are asked to ignore the content of the word and state the color of the ink. They often find it challenging not to be distracted by the content of the word. As a result, when the word and the ink color match, participants can quickly identify the ink color. However, when the color denoted by the word differs from the ink color, a longer reaction time is needed. In the Stroop task, multilingual individuals generally perform better. They have a stronger ability to focus on the ink color while ignoring the content of the word. This ability to focus on relevant information and suppress irrelevant information is one of the brain's executive functions, known as cognitive control. When we drive, we need to focus on the road and ignore distractions. Similarly, when students take exams, they need to concentrate on the test paper and ignore external noises. Inhibitory control is something each of us needs to focus, and numerous experiments show that people who are proficient in multiple languages perform better in all aspects of executive function. Why is this? Because multilingual thinking precisely hones the ability to switch between what to ignore and what to pay attention to, as well as the ability to switch between different tasks. To further explain this point, let's look at what happens in the brains of multilingual individuals when they switch languages. In many people's imagination, there might be a switch in the brain that toggles between different languages, turning off one language and opening another when not in use. For a long time, this was also the scientific consensus. However, this is not the case. Different languages are always in an open, automatic running state in our brains. When you hear a sound starting with S, depending on the context, words in some languages and English words that start with S are automatically activated in your brain. Regardless of the language, the brain remains open to all possible meanings a sound can indicate. And it's not just sounds that activate different languages, letters, lip shapes, and tones can all be triggers. The brain is always ready to accept any language input and quickly understand and respond, which is more efficient than switching back and forth between two languages. Essentially, the brain is a superorganism with parallel processing capabilities, especially so for multilingual individuals. Of course, the extent to which a language can be activated depends on various factors, including proficiency in the language, age and order of language learning, recent use of the language, and the similarity between languages. A language that has not been used recently is less activated, which is why if a person has not spoken a certain language for a long time, they may need a few hours or even days to regain fluency when they need to use it again. When multiple languages in the brain are activated simultaneously, multilingual individuals need to learn to ignore interference from other languages and repeatedly switch between the vocabulary and rules of different languages, which exercises their brains' control ability. Just like a well-exercised muscle, the core control areas of the bilingual brain are more developed, and their executive functions are stronger. Learning multiple languages can change the gray and white matter areas of the brain. The gray matter is where the brain houses nerve cell bodies and processes information, while the function of white matter is to transmit signals from one gray matter area to another through nerve impulses. To put it simply, gray matter is like cities and white matter is like highways connecting cities. Bilingual individuals have a higher gray matter density in the frontal lobe area and more white matter. Although gray matter volume and white matter integrity decline with age, knowing multiple languages can slow down this process. Therefore, the risk of cognitive impairment in older adults who know 2 or more languages is relatively low. There is a direct relationship between the number of languages spoken in a country and the incidence of Alzheimer's disease. In multilingual countries, the incidence of Alzheimer's disease is lower. Beyond executive functions, recent research suggests that mastering multiple languages can also enhance creativity. Researchers have measured people's performance before and after cross-cultural romances and found that cross-cultural romances increase the participants' creativity levels. The longer the romance, the stronger the ability to come up with creative names for product marketing. The more frequent the contact with foreign friends, the better the performance in entrepreneurship and work innovation. The reason why mastering multiple languages can enhance creativity is also related to the brain's processing mode of language, because the brain allows all languages to be activated and processed. In parallel, strengthening the connections between sounds, letters, and words in the minds of bilingual individuals, multilingual individuals can see connections between things and establish associations between seemingly unrelated things. These connections are crucial for generating insights, understanding, and intuition, which are the foundations of creativity. We've just discussed how learning multiple languages can enhance the brain's executive functions and creativity. Beyond this, the influence of language is even more profound as it shapes our perception and thinking to a certain extent. People who use different languages perceive many things differently. Take attention, for example. In some languages, the verb paired with attention is to concentrate, suggesting that attention requires effort. In French, the verb is to make, implying that attention doesn't exist unless it's created. In English, the verb is to pay, indicating attention's value, and in German, people talk about giving attention, treating it as a gift. The way different languages describe attention affects people's perception of it. Similarly, the way colors are described in various languages affects how people perceive colors. In Chinese, there are dozens, even hundreds of ways to describe colors, ranging from simple ones like bright red, sky blue, and bright yellow, to complex traditional Chinese colors like vermilion, mungbean green, and peacock blue. However, some languages have a very limited vocabulary for colors. At least 20 languages in the world have only 3 to 4 basic color terms, one for white or light colors, one for red-yellow hues, and one for black-green-blue hues. In English, there is only one basic word for blue, but in Russian, there are 2 different basic words, one for light blue and another for dark blue. When English and Russian speakers are tested on color discrimination, Russian speakers can distinguish these 2 shades of blue faster. The presence or absence of words for different shades of blue in a language does not hinder our perception of different colors, but it does affect our response speed. Language also influences our sense of direction. Some languages, like English, have words for cardinal directions, north, south, east, west, and relative directions, left, right, front, back. However, Some languages lack one of these types. For example, some languages only have cardinal directions, and speakers always need to be aware of where north, south, east, and west are. They even describe the position of their body and limbs in terms of cardinal directions, such as saying they use the south hand to grab an apple. Language can even affect our sensation of pain. For instance, researchers have found that if subjects are allowed to swear, they can keep their hands in ice water for longer. This might be because language can release physiological stress to some extent, which is why people instinctively swear when they bump into a corner or stub their toe. From the above, we can see that language significantly influences our perception and thinking, including our understanding of abstract concepts, sense of direction, and sensation of pain. This raises a question: does language limit our perception of the world? Linguists Edward Sapir and Benjamin Whorf proposed the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, one argument of which is that language determines thought. It includes the somewhat extreme view that the absence of certain words in a language can prevent people from thinking about the things those words represent. A classic example supporting this view is that the Inuit language has over 50 terms for snow. Snow is an important part of Inuit life, and they have many ways to utilize snow. Therefore, their perception of snow is different from others who might not understand some of their snow-related terms. Of course, the extreme view of linguistic determinism has faced much opposition, equating language with thought is too absolute. The author points out that not all ideas, memories, learning, and emotions are language-driven. For instance, there are things like love, which are better felt than expressed, and learning activities like riding a bicycle or swimming sometimes don't require language at all. Although language does not determine thought, it indeed shapes thinking in a powerful way. Edward Sapir once said, "It is an illusion to think of language merely as a means to solve specific problems of communication and thinking. In fact, the real world is largely built unconsciously on the language habits of the group. Language is one of our most powerful tools for processing information. If the system of one language filters our perception of the real world, then learning another language can provide us with another way to perceive the world. Beyond shaping perception and thinking, language even influences our personality. Sometimes, when a person switches to a different language, their personality appears to change as well. This is because each language is associated with its own culture, experiences, memories, emotions, and meanings. Choosing a certain language is like activating a unique system. For example, a study targeting Chinese English bilinguals found that participants exhibited more collectivism and humility when answering questions in Chinese corresponding to the characteristics of Chinese language and culture. Emotional responses can also change with language. Usually, the mother tongue elicits stronger emotional reactions, likely because it's the language we first experienced in life. For instance, saying I love you feels different in one's mother tongue compared to a second language. The former carries more emotional impact. The level of tension felt when swearing or using taboo language also varies between the mother tongue and a second language. As Nelson Mandela once said, if you talk to a man in a language he understands, that goes to his head. If you talk to him in his language, that goes to his heart. Conversely, this is why people prefer using a second language when they need emotional distance. Most bilinguals feel calmer and less emotional when using their second language. In psychotherapy, bilinguals are more likely to discuss trauma and painful topics in their second language. Studies also show that fear responses induced by language decrease when using a foreign language. Using different languages can also affect decision-making. When using a second language, people tend to make more logical and rational decisions. Take the classic trolley dilemma. A trolley is hurtling towards 5 unaware workers, and you are standing on a bridge above the tracks with a person next to you. Pushing this person off the bridge would result in their death, but stop the trolley, saving the 5 workers. Would you choose to save the 5 people at the cost of 1 life? When answering in their mother tongue, 20% of bilinguals said they would push the person to save 5 lives. However, this proportion increased to 33% when answering in a foreign language. The foreign language effect suggests that when facing moral dilemmas, people make more utilitarian decisions, such as sacrificing 1 person to save 5, when using a foreign language. This change might be due to the increased psychological distance and reduced emotional level when using a foreign language. Studies indicate that people are more rational when using their second language, whether in moral judgments or in decisions involving financial allocation, health, and medical choices. For example, in gambling scenarios, bilinguals are calmer and participate less when encouraged to gamble in their non-native language. Additionally, researchers have asked bilinguals to evaluate medical issues in their mother tongue or a second language. The results showed that using a foreign language reduced the perceived severity of disease symptoms and treatment side effects, making diseases seem more curable and physical and emotional suffering less intense. Using a foreign language also increased acceptance of experimental treatments, indicating that a foreign language can change the way we interpret health information. Who we are, what we believe in, and what we like are all influenced by language, as each language is associated with different experiences, memories, emotions, and meanings. Therefore, when we use different languages, different aspects of ourselves are highlighted. Alright, we have discussed from an individual perspective the impact of language on the brain, perception, thinking, and even personality. However, the influence of language isn't limited to just the individual. Now, let's broaden our perspective to look at the impact of language on society. Remember how we touched upon the issue of gender in language at the beginning? In many languages, nouns have grammatical gender. Although grammatical gender might not reflect people's gender views about certain things, studies show it does influence how people think and talk about objects. For instance, in a study, German English and Spanish English bilinguals were asked to describe a key. In German, the word for key is masculine, while in Spanish, it's feminine. German English bilinguals describe the key with words like hard, heavy, jagged, metallic, serrated, whereas Spanish English speakers used words like golden, intricate, little, lovely, tiny. Clearly, people's views of objects are greatly influenced by grammatical gender, and this influence is more profound than we might think. Anthropologist Alex Shams found that AI, or rather the gender stereotypes from humans, influenced language translation when using Google Translate from Turkish, a gender-neutral language. In Google's automatic translation, the Turkish TA is a doctor was translated to he in English, whereas TA is a nurse was translated to she. TA works hard was translated to he, and TA is lazy to she. Shams's discovery caused a stir on social media, and later, Google's translation algorithm was corrected to provide two gender options when translating TA from Turkish to English. This shows that gender stereotypes in language not only affect our view of objects, but also our view of real people. To resist the gender stereotypes caused by grammatical gender, some countries have even launched social movements calling for the cessation of gendered language in favor of gender-neutral terms. For example, Sweden added a new gender-neutral pronoun to the traditional masculine and feminine pronouns, and in France, a new gender-neutral pronoun il, blending the masculine il and the feminine elle, was created. In the past, most French nouns representing professions only had masculine forms, such as professor, lawyer, engineer, police officer, which historically were seen as male-dominated professions. With the rise of women in the workplace, feminine forms of these professional nouns began to be created, though these usages were not officially recognized. To address women in these professions, people had to use a phrase like a female judge instead of just judge. It wasn't until 2019 that the French Academy allowed feminine names for professions like doctor and professor, ending a years-long official ban. The impact of language on society is not only evident in gender perceptions. In national politics, the power of language is everywhere. The author points out that worldwide, the choice of words and creation of labels are not just to aptly reflect their content, but to change how people perceive what they represent. For example, the Bush administration called the estate tax, the death tax, oil drilling responsible energy exploration, and logging the healthy forests initiative. Similarly, the Biden administration changed the term illegal to unregistered for immigrants and foreigner to non-citizen. These different appellations evoke different feelings and reactions in the audience, influencing support or opposition decisions, showcasing the power of language. Many politicians use multiple languages to create effects on the political stage. In a famous Cold War speech, President John F. Kennedy said, "Ich bin ein Berliner," meaning I am a Berliner, to express solidarity with the people of Berlin. This phrase became historic because it was spoken in German during an English speech, and most German citizens were familiar with it. This made Kennedy's words resonate strongly with the audience, giving them great impact. The story of the Tower of Babel from the Bible illustrates the extraordinary power of language. The tower, perhaps humanity's first skyscraper, was built in the city of Babylon to reach heaven. Genesis mentions that when God saw humans building the tower to reach heaven, he said, "They are one people, and have one language, and nothing will be withheld from them which they purpose to do." To prevent them from reaching heaven, God scattered them across the earth and gave them different languages, making them unable to communicate or continue building the tower. The story of the Tower of Babel shows that language has both inclusive and exclusive properties, promoting communication but also hindering it. As philosopher Ludwig Wittgenstein once said, "The limits of my language mean the limits of my world." Hopefully, we can all learn another language to see a bigger world. Congratulations, you've just completed another book.